In 1981, a co-worker arrived at an office apartment in Georgia, expecting a routine task, picking up a key. Instead, she walked into a nightmare. Cameron Menzies was born on June 12, 1960. She was a dedicated member of the First United Methodist Church in Sylacauga, Alabama. She pursued her education at Gadsden State College, where she enrolled in the School of Court Reporting. Cam secured a position as a court reporter, a role that is crucial to legal proceedings. She begun making her mark in Savannah, Georgia, where her duties brought her into close contact with attorneys, judges, and court officials. On January 22, 1981, Cam arrived at an office apartment building located at 601 East 49th Street in Savannah. She was there simply to do her job, a task she had trained hard for and executed with care. Unbeknownst to her, danger loomed within the walls of that unassuming building. The following day, on January 23rd, a co-worker arrived at the office apartment to retrieve a key. Upon entering, she was met with a horrific and unexpected scene. 20-year-old Cam Menzies was lying lifeless on the floor. Without hesitation, the co-worker contacted the police authorities to report what she had seen. The police officers responded quickly and arrived at the scene to begin their assessment. They found Cam fully clothed and lying on the floor of the apartment. The room appeared mostly undisturbed. With one exception, a piano bench had been overturned. This small detail was the only immediate indication of a possible struggle. The officers secured the area and began the process of documenting the scene and collecting any evidence that might provide answers. As the investigation unfolded, the police learned a disturbing detail from Cam's recent past. Just 3 months earlier, she had been the victim of a brutal, indecent assault committed by an escaped convict. However, law enforcement confirmed that the man responsible for that attack was in custody at the time, effectively ruling him out as a suspect. Further examination revealed the extent of the violence inflicted upon her. Cam had been stabbed more than 30 times. There were no immediate suspects, and nothing at the scene indicated who might have wanted to harm her in such a vicious manner, and therefore the case eventually went cold. In 1999, nearly 2 decades after the crime happened, the case experienced an unexpected development. Earl Franklin Wagner Sr.'s wife came forward with a startling confession. She told the investigators that she had witnessed her husband commit the crime. However, despite the gravity of the claim, the district attorney at the time declined to pursue prosecution. With no arrest made, the case once again slipped into the background. It was not until 2017, almost another 2 decades later, that the case finally saw a shift. The authorities revisited the evidence and the witness statements, and this renewed investigation ultimately led to Earl Wagner being indicted. At the time of his indictment, Wagner was 70 years old and already serving a 20-year prison sentence in Ohio for an unrelated conviction of child molestation. Wagner's incarceration complicated but did not prevent the pursuit of justice in Cam's case. The authorities coordinated with Ohio officials as they prepared for potential extradition and prosecution. His scheduled release from the Ohio prison system in July 2019 added urgency to the legal process in Georgia, ensuring that he would not walk free before answering to the charges. In 2021, Wagner pleaded guilty. His guilty plea eliminated the need for a prolonged trial and confirmed what investigators had long suspected. He was sentenced to life in prison. In June 2000, 2 motorists traveling in Florida spotted an abandoned suitcase on the roadside. When they opened it, they uncovered the nude body of a woman. As the weeks passed, more bodies surfaced. Years later, a fingerprint match reopened the cold case and set off a transnational investigation. On June 24, 2000, a gruesome discovery was made along Flamingo Road near Cooper City in Florida. 2 motorists spotted a suitcase abandoned by the roadside. Inside, they found the nude body of a woman who was later identified as 35-year-old Kimberly Dietz Livesey. She was a known prostitute with a history of alcohol and illegal substance abuse. She had been arrested just weeks earlier, on June 7th, for prostitution. News of her demise stunned those who knew her, including friends from Alcoholics Anonymous and a local biker group. Despite a public plea for information, the investigators made little progress in Kim's case. Then, on August 9th, another body was found. This time, a duffel bag left near Dania Beach contained the remains of 21-year-old Sia Dames, who had been strangled to her end. Like Kim, she was involved in prostitution. The shocking similarities between the two cases raised suspicions, but there were still no solid leads to connect the dots. A little over a year later, on August 30th, 2001, the pattern continued. The body of 24-year-old Jessica Good was found floating in Biscayne Bay, covered in stab wounds. Her boyfriend told the police that she had gone to meet a light-skinned Hispanic man and never returned. With the demises of 3 women, all prostitutes, all found within a short time frame and geographical area, the authorities began to suspect that a single, dangerous individual might be responsible. Shortly after the body of Jessica Good was found in Biscayne Bay, the investigators identified Roberto Wagner Fernandes as a suspect in her case. The authorities moved quickly to gather evidence, but before they could arrest him, Fernandes fled the United States and returned to Brazil. Because Brazil does not have an extradition treaty with the US, bringing him back to face charges proved impossible. Fernandes was born on April 26, 1965, in the Brazilian state of Paraná. In 1989, at the age of 24, he married 20-year-old Danielle Amaral Busas. The couple made their home in the city of Londrina, where Fernandes worked as a private pilot, while Danielle pursued her studies to become a teacher. 2 years later, in 1991, they welcomed their daughter Mariella into the world. In the early morning hours of November 18, 1996, the residents of a Londrina apartment complex were startled by the sound of a heated domestic dispute, which quickly escalated into violence. The confrontation ended with at least 6 gunshots being fired inside the building. When the police were called to the scene, the witnesses reported that the man involved had fled with a small child in his car. The authorities soon apprehended the suspect, identifying him as 31-year-old Roberto Fernandes. His wife, 27-year-old Danielle Fernandes, had been shot with a Taurus TCP 738 and was rushed to the hospital, where she passed away from her injuries. During Fernandes' trial, however, disturbing revelations came to light. According to court proceedings, the argument had begun when Danielle discovered her husband's infidelity, specifically that he had been with a prostitute. Fernandes claimed that his wife had threatened him with a revolver during the confrontation, which led him to panic and fatally shoot her in self-defense. This version of events was met with skepticism, especially after new testimony was introduced. The woman involved, a prostitute, came forward to the police with a troubling account of her encounter with Fernandes. She alleged that during their meeting, he had consumed illegal substances and a large amount of whiskey. According to her, Fernandes became violent, beating her with a water bottle, punching and kicking her, and attempting to drown her in a motel bathtub. She said she managed to escape and run toward the door, at which point he abruptly calmed down and told her to get dressed. The woman also stated that she later contacted Fernandes to verify the authenticity of the check he had given her as payment. Fernandes and his legal team countered these claims by portraying Danielle as intoxicated and unstable during their fight. They also attempted to discredit the prostitute's testimony, asserting that she had become aggressive during the encounter and was seeking to extort more money through the follow-up phone call. Despite the disturbing details and physical evidence suggesting Fernandes's guilt, the case ended in his acquittal. The court ruled that there was not enough evidence to convict him, and Fernandes was released. After Fernandes was acquitted, the tensions in Brazil did not subside. Her family, enraged by the verdict, were rumored to have hired a hitman to exact revenge. Whether or not this threat was real, Fernandes claimed to fear for his life. Determined to leave his past behind, he fled the country and relocated to the United States, eventually settling in Miami, Florida. Between 1996 and 1999, Fernandes attempted to rebuild his life. He took on work as a bus driver for a touring company and later secured a job as a flight attendant at Miami International Airport. But despite the appearance of a fresh start, his behavior remained troubling. During this period, he reportedly continued to engage the services of prostitutes on a regular basis, echoing the pattern of conduct that had once led to tragedy in Brazil. Over the next several years, Fernandes was reportedly linked to other violent crimes involving prostitutes in Brazil, including an indecent assault in 2003. Despite being named a suspect, he was never arrested. On December 13, 2005, Fernandes was flying a Cessna 310 when tragedy struck again, this time in the skies. En route to Argentina, he lost control of the aircraft and crashed in the Misiones department of Paraguay. His life was immediately ended. His body was transported back to Brazil, where he was buried in his hometown. For years, the cases in Miami remained unresolved, and it seemed that Fernandes had escaped justice once more, this time by not being alive. A breakthrough came in 2011 when the investigators matched Fernandes's fingerprints to evidence recovered from all 3 Miami crime scenes. The detectives traveled to Brazil, hoping to confront him. Instead, they were informed that Fernandes had passed away 6 years earlier in the plane crash. The American authorities were skeptical. Given the evasive nature of Fernandes's past behavior, there was suspicion that he might have faked his end. However, at the time, legal restrictions prevented them from exhuming the grave to confirm his identity. The case remained at a standstill until 2018, when a separate case involving a Cuban national led to a new legal precedent. This development created an opportunity for investigators to revisit the Fernandes case. In 2020, with the assistance of the Brazilian Federal Police, the authorities were granted permission to exhume Fernandes's remains. Forensic testing was conducted to determine whether the body buried in his grave truly belonged to him. The long-awaited confirmation came on August 31, 2021. In a press conference, Broward County Sheriff Gregory Toney announced that Fernandes had been officially identified as the perpetrator behind the Miami cases of Kim Dietz-Livesey, Cia de Mes, and Jessica Good. It was also confirmed that Fernandes had indeed perished in the 2005 aviation crash. Following this revelation, the authorities in both the United States and Brazil launched a deeper investigation into Fernandes's past. The investigators have not closed the book on Fernandes. They believe he may be responsible for other unsolved cases in South Florida. Michael Livesey, the former husband of Kimberly Dietz-Livesey, waited 20 years for answers. He said, "My heart goes out to the loved ones of every victim. I hope this gives them a sense of closure as it does to me." The fact that Fernandes was never brought to justice for his crimes still troubles investigators. Detective Zachary Scott said, "I wish we were up here showing you his mugshot. Unfortunately, we were deprived of that pleasure. Knowing his last minutes on Earth were probably filled with terror makes me feel a little better." In January 1982, a medical student just months away from becoming a pediatrician vanished without a trace. But what followed was a trail of lies, suspicious behavior, and decades of unanswered questions. Robert Durst was born on April 12, 1943, in New York City and raised in Scarsdale, New York. He was the eldest child of Seymour Durst, a powerful real estate magnate, and Bernice Herstein. Robert came from a prominent lineage. His paternal grandfather, Joseph Durst, was a Jewish immigrant from Austria-Hungary who arrived in the United States in 1902 and established the Durst Organization in 1927. Robert grew up with 3 younger siblings, Douglas, Tommy, and Wendy. Despite his privileged upbringing, Robert often kept to himself, and former classmates from Scarsdale High School recalled him as a loner. Robert pursued higher education at Lehigh University, where he earned a bachelor's degree in economics in 1965. Later that year, he enrolled in a doctoral program at the University of California, Los Angeles. During his time at UCLA, Robert met Susan Berman, a relationship that would become significant in later years. However, he eventually withdrew from the program and returned to New York in 1969. In the early 1970s, Robert attempted to lead a simpler life by opening a small health food store in Vermont. The business venture was short-lived. In 1973, at the urging of his father, he closed the store and returned to New York to become involved with the family business. Despite being the eldest son, Robert never fully embraced the corporate environment. In 1992, his father broke family tradition and appointed Robert's younger brother, Douglas, to take over the Durst organization. This decision deeply wounded Robert, who believed he was entitled to inherit control of the company. The internal family conflict led to Robert's estrangement and eventual legal action for his share of the inheritance. Robert's personal life took a significant turn in late 1971 when he met Kathleen McCormick, a dental hygienist. Their relationship progressed quickly. After just 2 dates, Robert invited Kathleen to live with him in Vermont. She moved in during January 1972. When Robert returned to New York under family pressure to work at the Durst organization, Kathleen accompanied him. The couple got married on April 12, 1973, in Manhattan. By the early 1980s, Kathleen was a medical student in her final year at the Albert Einstein College of Medicine in the Bronx, aspiring to become a pediatrician. Just months shy of earning her degree, she vanished under mysterious circumstances. On the night of January 31, 1982, Kathleen was last seen by someone other than her husband when she unexpectedly arrived at a dinner party in Newtown, Connecticut. Her friend, who hosted the event, noticed Kathleen appeared distressed and unusually dressed in red sweatpants, clothing she rarely wore in public. Later that evening, Kathleen received a phone call from Robert, prompting her to leave the gathering and return to their cottage in South Salem, New York. After that night, she was never seen again. The day after Kathleen's last confirmed sighting, she was expected to meet her friend, Gilbert Najami, at the Lion's Gate, a Manhattan pub. When Kathleen failed to show up, Gilbert grew alarmed and began calling the police, persistently reaching out over several days. Despite these efforts, it was not until later that week that Robert officially reported his wife missing. A doorman and the superintendent at their Riverside Drive apartment later stated they had seen Kathleen on February 1st, but their accounts were uncertain. The doorman, in particular, noted that he had only glimpsed her from behind and at a distance, casting doubt on his identification. A private investigator hired by Robert's lawyer would later claim that the doorman had not seen her at all and might not have been on duty the night in question. 3 weeks after Robert filed the missing person report, the superintendent found Kathleen's personal items discarded in the building's trash compactor. It also emerged that 3 weeks before vanishing, Kathleen had sought treatment at Jacobi Medical Center in the Bronx for facial injuries. She had confided in a friend that Robert had assaulted her, but she did not pursue legal action. Around the same time, Kathleen had requested a divorce settlement of $250,000, which Robert refused. Instead, he retaliated by canceling her credit cards, removing her from their joint bank account, and halting tuition payments for her final months of medical school. Robert had been romantically involved with Prudence Farrow for 3 years at the time of Kathleen's disappearance, and was living separately in another apartment. He initially announced a $100,000 reward for information about his wife, but later reduced the amount to $15,000. As concern intensified, one of Kathleen's friends and her sister broke into the South Salem cottage. There, they found the house in disarray. Her belongings were thrown away, her mail had piled up unopened, and the entire residence appeared ransacked. According to Robert, the last time he saw Kathleen was when he dropped her off at the Katana train station, where she planned to take a 9:15 p.m. train back to Manhattan. He also claimed that she later phoned him from their Riverside Drive apartment. Additionally, he stated that on February 4th, a supervisor at her medical school called to inform him that she had not attended class all week and had phoned in sick on February 1st. Whether that call actually came from Kathleen remains unknown. 8 years after her disappearance, Robert filed for divorce, citing spousal abandonment. The case remained cold. Susan Berman, a close confidant of Robert, played a pivotal role in shaping his alibi after the disappearance of his wife. The daughter of David Berman, a powerful figure in Jewish American organized crime, Susan had grown up surrounded by underworld connections. Her father was instrumental in controlling illegal gambling operations in Depression-era Minneapolis, and later became involved in the Flamingo Hotel and Casino on the Las Vegas Strip. On December 24, 2000, Susan was found deceased in her home in Benedict Canyon, Los Angeles, California. Her life was ended execution style. Her neighbors had contacted the authorities after noticing her front door ajar and one of her dogs wandering loose. Shortly before Susan's body was discovered, a letter addressed to the Beverly Hills Police Department arrived, postmarked December 23, 2000. It contained her address and the word cadaver, an ominous clue that immediately raised suspicions. Evidence showed that Robert had been in Northern California in the days leading up to the crime and flew to New York the night before Susan's body was found. Around the time of her demise, Susan had received 2 payments totaling $50,000 from Robert. Though Robert admitted to sending Susan $25,000 and later faxed LAPD a copy of her 1982 deposition related to Kathleen's disappearance, he refused to undergo further questioning. Robert claimed that Susan had called him shortly before her demise, saying the LAPD wanted to speak with her about Kathleen. However, an investigation raised doubts about this claim, finding no clear evidence that LAPD or Westchester authorities had scheduled such an interview. Around this time, Robert learned from his sister Wendy that the case into Kathleen's disappearance had been reopened. In response, he fled to Galveston, Texas, assuming the identity of a mute woman named Dorothy Sinner to avoid detection. Susan's biographer Kathy Scott suggested that Robert ended the life of Susan because she possessed damning knowledge about his wife's disappearance. Meanwhile, Robert began living in a low-profile apartment in Galveston. On November 15, 2000, his landlord, Klaus Renee Dillman, received a call from someone claiming to assist a deaf-mute woman seeking to rent the unit. Robert's attempt to vanish quietly unraveled when, on October 9, 2001, body parts belonging to his 71-year-old neighbor, Morris Black, were discovered floating in Galveston Bay. The authorities arrested Robert shortly after the grisly discovery. He was granted bail at $250,000, but failed to appear in court on October 16, prompting a warrant for his arrest on charges of bail jumping. He remained a fugitive until November 30, when he was caught shoplifting minor items like Band-Aids, a newspaper, and a chicken salad sandwich from a Wegmans supermarket in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, despite having $500 in cash on him. A search of his rental car revealed an alarming cachet of $37,000 in cash, 2 handguns, marijuana, Morris Black's driver's license, and printed directions to Kathleen's former home in Connecticut. Even while evading the authorities, Robert continued to exhibit threatening behavior. He used his time on the run to stalk his brother Douglas, reportedly visiting the driveway of Douglas's home in Katana, New York, while armed. This act heightened fears within the Durst family. Once apprehended in Pennsylvania, Robert retained legal counsel and was eventually extradited to Texas to stand trial for ending the life of Morris, launching the next chapter in his increasingly tangled legal saga. Robert testified he shot Morris in self-defense and was acquitted due to a lack of forensic evidence to contest his account. Following the acquittal, Robert pled guilty to evidence tampering by dismembering Morris's body. As part of a plea bargain, he received a sentence of 5 years and was given credit for time served, requiring him to serve 3 years in prison. Robert was then paroled on July 15, 2005. On December 11, 2000, shortly before Susan was found lifeless, Robert married Deborah Lee Cheriton. The two had previously lived together for a short period in 1990 at a Fifth Avenue apartment, but they never maintained a traditional marital relationship. Robert later revealed in the 2005 deposition that their marriage had been purely strategic, describing it as a marriage of convenience. He confided in his sister Wendy that he had married Deborah so she could inherit his fortune, as he was contemplating to end his own life at the time. When Robert was arrested in 2001, it was Deborah who wired the $250,000 needed for his bail. A decade later, on March 14, 2015, Robert was arrested in New Orleans for the case of Susan Berman. The authorities discovered that he was carrying numerous prescription medications, including substances for high blood pressure, muscle relaxation, acid reflux, blood flow, and the sleep aid melatonin. Robert's declining health had been a recurring issue. He had undergone several major medical procedures, including surgery for esophageal cancer, the installation of a brain shunt to treat hydrocephalus, and cervical spinal fusion. Robert was transferred to California and arraigned there in early November 2016. In 2016, Kathleen's family petitioned the court to have her declared legally deceased. Their request was approved the following year. Her mother, Anne McCormick, sued Robert for $100 million, alleging that he took Kathleen's life and denied her family the right to bury her. Both of Kathleen's parents have since passed away, but her sister Mary McCormick Hughes remained steadfast in her belief that Robert was responsible. In 2018, a U.S. Court of Appeals revised Kathleen's legal date of demise to January 31, 1982, the night she disappeared. Although a wrongful demise lawsuit filed by her sister Carol Bamonte was dismissed in 2019 due to timing, momentum in the case continued to build. During his 2021 trial for Susan's case, his legal team revealed that Robert had been diagnosed with bladder cancer. His deteriorating physical condition was evident during various court appearances and incarcerations. On September 17, 2021, 78-year-old Robert was convicted of Susan's crime and several weeks later was sentenced to life in prison. In October, Robert was also charged for taking the life of Kathleen. On October 16th, he tested positive for COVID-19 and was placed on a ventilator. He was struggling to breathe and speak. It remained unclear how Robert had contracted the virus or whether it had spread to others present during the court proceedings. But Robert's long legal saga came to an end on January 10, 2022, when he lost his life after cardiac arrest at San Joaquin General Hospital in French Camp, California. He had been undergoing medical tests when he suffered the cardiac episode and failed to respond to resuscitation efforts. At the time of his demise, Robert remained in the custody of the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. Following his demise, Kathleen's family once again pursued legal action, filing a wrongful demise lawsuit against Robert's estate in January 2022. This marked their fourth suit since 2015, as they sought to secure compensation and accountability. In response, a federal judge in the Southern District of New York issued a ruling barring Deborah, Robert's widow and heir, from taking any action with regard to his estimated $100 million estate. The court required Deborah and her attorney to appear in court on March 25, 2022, to show cause why a formal order should not be enacted. In March 2023, a federal court allowed the wrongful demise lawsuit to proceed, dismissing concerns that the claim was untimely due to Robert's passing. The judge ruled that Robert's demise did not invalidate the family's right to seek justice through civil litigation. This decision gave Kathleen's surviving relatives renewed hope for a resolution after decades of unanswered questions and legal obstacles.